Spinmaster is a side-scrolling beat-em-up game released for the Neo Geo in 1993. While not being a very popular game, it received a release on the Wii Virtual Console in 2010. With so many games just like it being released in the early 90s, is it worth revisiting or should it just stay in the past? Spinmaster, also known as Miracle Adventure in Japan, was developed by Data East and published by SNK. Data East was known for developing quality arcade games, however this was their first release for the Neo Geo. According to a Japanese arcade flyer, the game was very much inspired by popular Data East game, Joe and Mac. The game also features the return of recurring Data East villain, the Mad Doctor. The Mad Doctor, who literally just looks like Dr. Wily from Mega Man, has been featured in Data East games Joe and Mac Returns, Diet Go-Go, and Tumble Pop. The character designs are almost exactly the same as the ones in another Data East game titled Dashin' Desperados. While the characters are similar, that's about where the similarities between the two games end. Dashin' Desperados places more of a focus on platforming and less on the action. After Data East went under in 2003, Japanese company G-Mode picked up the rights to the game as well as many other Data East titles. This is how the game ended up on the Wii Virtual Console. However, in March of 2012, they removed all of their games from the service for unknown reasons. G-Mode also released the game for the Zeebo in 2010 as well. The Zeebo is an Android home console with a focus on markets in Mexico and Brazil. While the overall look and the feel of the game is nothing special, that's not necessarily a bad thing. After booting up the game, we get a quick look at the controls, some brief story, and then we're thrown right in. While we get an extremely brief cutscene before the game starts, most of the game's story details can be found in the manual. An ancient treasure map has been torn into 5 pieces that are scattered throughout the world. Treasure hunters Johnny and Tom have one piece of this map until it, along with Johnny's girlfriend Mary, are stolen by the Mad Doctor. The two then must travel the world and collect the other pieces of the map, as well as rescue Mary. Overall, a pretty generic story, but Spinmaster doesn't place a lot of emphasis on it, so it's not really a huge deal. The graphical style of this game looks very good. While again, nothing special, there is always a lot going on at once on the screen, and we see very little slowdown. We also see comic book style visual representations of sound effects, like crack, for almost every time you hit an enemy in the game. Between this, the large amount of enemies, and your power-ups, the game achieves quite a chaotic look overall, and I'd say the game feels just unique enough to stand on its own. Spinmaster is definitely lacking in the music department. Overall, it's extremely generic and doesn't really stand out in any way. This really doesn't matter though, because you can barely hear the music over the ridiculous amount of sound effects. Between power-ups, hits, and voice samples, the sound effects pretty much drown out everything else in the game. It definitely gets annoying the more enemies you fight, and while not a huge issue, it's definitely something worth mentioning. One thing that this game definitely gets right is that it's very easy and fun to play. If you have ever played these type of games before, you'll be right at home. You begin the game with just a yo-yo which acts as a short-range weapon, however you can get various power-ups through treasure boxes throughout levels. These range from ice crystals to boxing gloves as well as many others, however we found ourselves mostly just using the bombs once we got them and not much else. Every weapon has a special attack you can use by simply holding down the attack button. You also have a limited amount of bombs you can use, which destroy most of the enemies on screen and can do a good bit of damage on bosses. Other than that, you can slide into enemies to hurt them, as well as just plain jump on their heads like Mario. For the most part, we found ourselves just jumping around slamming the attack button. The combat is fun, even though there's not much to it. There are 5 stages in the game, split into 2 or 3 scenes each. They each have a specific theme and enemies special to just that stage. Each one culminates with a boss fight, none of which stand out as being particularly unique or difficult. The final boss has 5 different phases, and honestly it just feels a little too long. The game can be completed in under a half hour, but this section just feels like it drags a bit compared to the fast pace of the rest of the game. After defeating the Mad Doctor and rescuing Mary, the game gives you 3 choices of where to go to get the treasure. One leads to the treasure, one leads to a monster, and one has the treasure exploding in Johnny and Tom's faces. None of these have any real impact other than a brief scene, but it is a cool feature. If there's anything to say about Spinmaster, it's that it's extremely fun to play. Its short length, low difficulty, and tight controls make it a breeze to get through, and we even played it a few times in a row ourselves. While it may be fairly generic overall, it's hard not to recommend it to someone who wants a quick and fun multiplayer experience. We think that the game holds up despite its flaws.
Wow!